My name is Michelle Hargrove. I am 34 years old. And on a Friday night in January, I received a phone call at midnight from my brother that made me question something I was looking at with my own eyes. My husband, Daniel, was asleep beside me. I could see the rise and fall of his breathing. I could hear the specific sound of his sleep, steady, measured, the sound I had fallen asleep beside for 6 years. He was there, right there. I could have reached across and touched his shoulder. My brother, Aaron, was on the phone telling me he was at the airport. Shelley, he said. He has called me Shelley since we were children, some childhood thing that never stopped. I need you to hear me. Daniel is at the airport. I'm looking at him right now. That's impossible, I whispered. I was not yet out of bed. I was looking at my husband sleeping beside me and holding the phone to my ear and trying to reconcile two things that could not both be true. I'm sending you a photo, Aaron said. The photo arrived. I opened it with the specific reluctance of someone who does not want to see what they are about to see. A man in the departures terminal of Louisville International Airport. Taken from perhaps 30 feet away, the kind of photo you take on a phone when you're trying to document something without being noticed. The man's back was partially to the camera. He was wearing a navy blue jacket. Same height as Daniel. Same build, broad through the shoulders, the particular way Daniel carries himself when he is standing still, slightly forward-leaning. Same jacket. Daniel had a navy blue jacket he wore in winter. I had seen it on the hook by our front door that evening. I looked at the photo. I looked at my sleeping husband. I quietly got out of bed. I picked up my keys from the nightstand. I found my shoes in the dark by the door. I went to the front entrance and checked the coat hook. The navy jacket was not there. I drove to the airport alone in the cold January night, 20 minutes of highway that I do not remember making any decisions during. I parked and I went inside. And when I saw what was happening in that departures terminal, my whole body went cold. But before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years. We met when I was 27 and he was 29, introduced by a mutual friend who had correctly identified that we were both, in his words, unnecessarily serious people who needed someone equally serious to talk to. We had dinner once, then twice, and by the third meeting had established the particular rhythm of two people who have found, in each other, someone worth being honest with. He was a hospital pharmacist, careful and precise in the way that his work required and that extended, naturally, into the rest of his life. He thought before he spoke. He kept his word. He did not make statements he could not support. He was not a dramatic person. He was not someone you would describe as surprising. I was an architect. I worked for a mid-sized firm in Louisville, Kentucky, that focused on institutional and commercial projects. I was the steadier of the two of us, less analytical than Daniel, more intuitive, more likely to know something before I could explain why I knew it. Our marriage was not one of those that generate stories at dinner parties. It was solid and quiet and mutually respectful, and the kind of thing that people who understand what marriage actually requires over a long stretch of time would recognize as the real version of it. Which is why Aaron's phone call at midnight was so disorienting. Not because I believed him immediately, but because I did not disbelieve him immediately either. Something in his voice. Aaron is not a person who calls at midnight with false alarms, is not a person who does dramatic things for their own sake. Meant I picked up the phone expecting something real. And the jacket was not on the hook. Aaron was at the airport because he worked the late shift at a car rental desk in the departures level, a job he had been doing for 3 years while finishing his degree part-time, the specific working while studying life of a 26-year-old who is taking the longer road and making it work. He had texted me when he spotted the man, then called when I didn't respond fast enough. He was still at his desk when I came through the departures entrance, and he caught my eye immediately and tilted his head slightly toward the far end of the terminal. I followed his look. The man was standing near a gate, Gate 14, which I could see from where I was standing served a flight to Chicago departing at 12:45 a.m. He had his back to me at an angle, not completely, but enough that I could not yet see his face clearly. The jacket was navy blue. The build, broad shoulders, that forward lean was right. The height, as far as I could judge from across the terminal, matched. I walked toward gate 14. I am going to tell you what I was thinking as I walked because it matters for understanding the rest of the story. I was not thinking about betrayal. I was not thinking about what it would mean if my husband was at an airport at midnight for a flight to Chicago that he had not mentioned. I was thinking with the specific linear focus that sometimes overtakes me in moments of high stress about verification. I needed to see the face. I needed to confirm or rule out. Everything else was secondary to that single step. I reached the gate area. The man turned, reaching for something in his bag, and I saw his face. It was not Daniel. I stopped walking. It was not Daniel, but the resemblance from behind, from Aaron's distance and angle in the specific jacket, was genuinely striking. The man was perhaps 45 years old, with the same build and the same coloring and the same jacket that had been manufactured by a company that apparently sold many of them in Louisville that winter, because Daniel had bought his 6 months ago and had not considered himself particularly distinctive in it. He was not Daniel. I stood at the edge of the gate area, and I breathed for a moment. Just breathed. And then something else happened. I was turning to go find Aaron and tell him when I saw, in the row of seats to the left of the gate, a woman I recognized. Her name was Sarah Elliott. She was a colleague of Daniel's at the hospital. I had met her at the hospital's holiday party 2 years earlier and once or twice at other work-adjacent gatherings. She was a pharmacist in the same department. Daniel had mentioned her occasionally the way you mention colleagues, a work story here, an update on a department situation there. She was sitting at gate 14 with a carry-on bag between her feet and her phone in her hands, waiting for the 12:45 to Chicago. This would not have registered as significant. People fly to Chicago. Colleagues fly to Chicago. I would have noted it and forgotten it by the time I reached my car, except that on the seat beside her, visible from where I was standing, was a navy blue jacket folded over the armrest. I looked at the jacket. I looked at Sarah Elliott. She had not seen me. I walked back to Aaron's desk. I told him it wasn't Daniel. He was relieved and embarrassed in equal measure. The resemblance had been real enough to warrant the call, but a call at midnight to tell your sister her husband is at an airport is not a comfortable thing to have been wrong about. I told him it was fine. I told him I was glad he called. I drove home. Daniel was still asleep when I came back to bed. I lay beside him in the dark, and I thought about what I had seen. Not the man who was not Daniel. The jacket on the seat beside Sarah Elliott. And the fact that Daniel had mentioned 3 weeks earlier that Sarah was going through a very difficult divorce, that she was not doing well, that he had been trying to be a good colleague to her because the situation was hard and she didn't have a lot of people around her. I lay in the dark, and I did the thing that I do when I know something before I can explain why I know it. In the morning, over coffee, I told Daniel about the call from Aaron, about the man in the navy jacket, about driving to the airport. I told him all of it, including the jacket on the seat beside Sarah Elliott. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sarah's husband left her 2 weeks ago. She told me at work. She has been in a bad place." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "She has a sister in Chicago. I know she has been talking about going to see her. I didn't know she was going tonight." He looked at me. "Did you think I was there?" "No," I said, which was true. I had not driven to the airport because I believed he was there. I had driven because the jacket was not on the hook, and I had needed to see. "The jacket," he said. He stood up and went to the front entrance and opened the closet door, which I had not thought to check in the dark of midnight. The jacket was on a hanger inside. "I put it in the closet last week," he said. The hook was getting crowded. He looked at me from the entrance. There was something in his expression that was not hurt and was not defensive. It was the look he had when he was thinking carefully before he said something. "I'm glad you went," he said. "You are? You needed to see," he said. "That's who you are. You needed to verify it yourself." He came back to the table and sat down. I would have done the same thing. I called Aaron that morning to let him know the full story. He laughed about the jacket, the specific laugh of someone releasing tension that had been sitting in them since midnight. He said he had barely slept. I told him I was glad he called. I meant it, not because there was anything to find, but because Aaron had seen something that concerned him and had called me immediately and without hesitation, which is what a brother does. and that instinct mattered regardless of how the particular situation resolved. We talked for 20 minutes about other things: life, his degree program, a woman he was seeing, the specific accumulated ordinary news of two siblings who talk regularly and like each other. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with my coffee gone cold and thought about the previous 12 hours. Midnight phone call. Photo of a man who was not my husband. Drive to an airport in January. The man turning to show a face that was not Daniel's. Sarah Elliott and her sister in Chicago, and a jacket on a seat beside her that she was probably bringing to someone who had done nothing to be part of this story. And Daniel, this morning, saying he would have done the same thing. I want to tell you what I think the actual story of that night was, because I have had several months to think about it, and I believe I know. The actual story is not about a husband at an airport. It is about a marriage that is solid enough that a midnight phone call and a missing jacket and a 20-minute drive could be absorbed without damage. That the verification I needed to do was something I could do and come home from and tell Daniel about over coffee, and that he could hear it without devastation or fury, and that we could both understand that the need to verify was not a failure of trust but a specific and human response to a specific and disorienting set of circumstances. Trust is not the absence of checking. Trust is what you find on the other side of the check. It is what you come home to. I came home to Daniel asleep in our bed. I verified, and I came home to him, awake, with his hands around a coffee cup and his honest face looking at me across the table. 6 years of marriage. The specific, quiet solidity of it. It held. It always held. That is the thing worth knowing. The jacket was in the closet. It was always in the closet. And coming home and finding out was the best possible version of a midnight drive in January, which is not a high bar, but which was, that particular morning over cold coffee, more than enough.